Okay, let's unpack this. For years, PSG felt like, I don't know, football's version of a blockbuster movie that never quite delivered its final act.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, like it had all the stars, the budget.
Exactly. A team built on the biggest names, Messi, Mbappe, Neymar, the sort of glittering, really expensive assembly. Yet they consistently stumbled in the one competition they really, really craved, the Champions League.
Mm-hmm.
But now, just a couple years after that superstar trio kind of disbanded, this same club finds itself right on the cusp of potentially winning that elusive trophy.
Well, with a completely different kind of team.
Totally different. Younger, less famous maybe, but they seem united by something, beyond just individual brilliance.
And that remarkable transformation is exactly what we're diving into today. We're exploring the evolution of Paris Saint-Germain under its Qatari ownership, really focusing on how their strategy shifted and what that's meant for this journey to the Champions League final against Inter Milan.
Yeah, and we've been digging into some really interesting articles from The Guardian and NBC News that chart this whole fascinating pivot.
So our mission really is to pull out the absolute core insights from these sources. We want to understand how PSG managed to shed that, celebrity waxwork museum image.
Right, that phrase really sticks.
It does, and how they built a team that seems genuinely capable of European glory. And maybe most importantly, what does this tell us about the long game, the bigger picture of this massive project?
Okay, so to really get where PSG is now, you almost have to rewind, don't you? The sources take us back to this seemingly pivotal lunch, November 2010, at the French presidential palace.
Right. The guest list is pretty notable. You had the French president at the time, Nicolas Sarkozy, UEFA chief Michel Platini, and Tamim Al Thani, who is then the crown prince of Qatar, now the emir.
And it's important that the sources make this point, that both Platini and Sarkozy have strongly denied this meeting influenced, what happened next.
Yes, that denial is noted.
Okay, so they deny it. But what followed were some, let's say striking connections. Just 11 days after that lunch, Michel Platini casts his vote for Qatar to host the 2022 World Cup.
Which was a controversial vote at the time.
Very.
Yeah.
And then almost immediately after that vote, Qatar's state broadcaster steps in and snaps up the TV rights to France's Ligue 1, rights that apparently were struggling to sell elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And the timing continues. Just 6 months later, Qatar Sports Investments, QSI, buys PSG, a club described in the sources as being in pretty significant financial trouble then.
And then it keeps going. Fast forward another year, France sells 50 Airbus planes to Qatar Airways. I mean, when you lay it out like that,
it's hard not to see a pattern or at least a series of very convenient connections emerging from those dots, yeah.
It definitely paints a picture, doesn't it, of these tightly interwoven political and financial interests. And this really kicks off what we could probably call Phase 1, starting around 2011.
Exactly. And this first phase, it was characterized by very direct, very visible state-backed investment. The immediate focus seemed to be on brand building, getting global recognition fast.
So bringing in the big names straight away.
Right, like Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Huge personality, huge profile. They changed the club logo too, didn't they? To really emphasize Paris, making it crystal clear this wasn't just any French club, this was the Paris club.
Yeah, the global ambition was clear from the start. Launching those boutiques worldwide, even if they were loss leaders initially, it was about planting the flag.
Absolutely. And that branding effort, it evolved. That Nike Jordan deal in 2018, the sources really highlight that as a kind of masterstroke.
It really shifted the perception, didn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
It positioned PSG not just as a football club, but as something cooler, NBA adjacent, fashion forward, tapping into a whole different market.
That's what a lifestyle brand, really.
Precisely. And if you just look at the raw numbers, that initial $70 million investment back in 2011, the sources are now valuing the club somewhere between, $3.5 billion and $4.2 billion.
Wow. That's a staggering return, whichever way you slice it.
It really is.
Okay, so that's Phase 1. Then came what one source calls the basking superstars phase. Mm-hmm. This is Phase 2. Roughly 2017 up to maybe 2023, really culminating in that Neymar, Messi, Mbappe era. The image that, for many people, was PSG.
Yeah, and the sources, they don't hold back describing it. That phrase again, a debauched celebrity waxwork museum, it conjures up those images, like Neymar breakdancing on crutches at some party.
Right. And on the pitch, despite all that incredible individual talent, this was the period of repeated, quite public disappointment in the Champions League. Knocked out early in 22 and 23.
And the sources point out something interesting. The stars themselves, the big three, they actually only played together in about a third of the potential games they could have.
Which is kind of amazing when you think about it. But here's where it gets, I think, really interesting. The sources argue pretty strongly that even with those on-field CL failures this whole era, it was not a failure for the bigger commercial project.
Not at all, actually. That Hollywood stuff, the sheer celebrity power, the glamour, it wasn't just vanity, it was deeply strategic. This period saw the club's revenue just skyrocket. Over $1 billion, apparently.
Wow.
It brought in those high-end commercial partners, the phrase used as high-end stuff rather than noodle partners by numbers. Premium brands, matchday revenues went way up, cash flow ramped up significantly.
So the star power wasn't just for show on the pitch. It was actively, deliberately building that global brand recognition they were after all along. All those phrases like cultural icon, globally recognized lifestyle brand, they keep popping up.
Exactly. This era successfully laid that crucial commercial foundation. It built the brand awareness, the cachet, that the project's current phase is now really leveraging. One source even notes that Lionel Messi, who maybe didn't seem thrilled with his time there,
Yeah, you got that impression.
he still gave a lot more than he might have realized just by being there purely for the project's commercial goals. His presence alone was massive for the brand.
Okay, so that really sets the stage. You've got this club built on celebrity, commercially booming worldwide, but kind of perpetually frustrated on the European stage. How did they pivot? How do you get from that waxwork museum to a team potentially winning the Champions League just 2 years after those huge stars left?
Well, that's the big strategic turning point the sources really focus on, starting right after that 2023 season. With Messi gone, Neymar leaving, Mbappe's future uncertain. For most clubs, that's a rebuild. A step back, maybe?
You'd expect a dip, definitely.
But PSG's management, they decided very consciously to completely change its strategy.
They actually stopped, or said they stopped, obsessing over the Champions League as the be-all and end-all immediate goal. That's quite a statement.
It is, and instead they publicly announced they would build a project around the young players and youngsters coming through the Parisian training program, basically giving themselves a bit more breathing room, focusing on development.
And this is where Luis Enrique fits in. Hired in 2023, he seems like the perfect guy for this kind of shift, right? He's handled massive egos at Barcelona, won the Champions League there, managed Spain. He's used to pressure.
Absolutely. And his specific job at PSG, according to the sources, was to build a team where the players would, and this is key, defend and attack in unison. A complete departure from the more individualistic approach of the star era.
You see that change reflected straight away in just the makeup of the team. The average age, the sources point out, has dropped quite a bit, from nearly 28 down to 25 this season.
Yeah, and they brought in this wave of young, dynamic talent. Players described as more ego-free. You have guys like Desiree Doué, who one source called the anti-Neymar and orderly modern prodigy.
Interesting description.
Or Vitinha, who apparently just loves the ball and nothing else, totally dedicated to training.
Bradley Barcola is another one they highlight. He's only 22. Enrique's called him the best passer in League One and one of the best dribblers in Europe. High praise.
Very high. And they also brought in other promising young guys, Joan Neves, William Pacho, Kovacic Kvaratskhelia, mixing them with the quality they already had, like the captain Marquinhos, who's now remarkably the oldest regular starter at 31.
So it's a real blend, but leaning much younger.
And the sources really emphasize this fundamental shift in the team's whole attitude, their collective style. It's just not a system built around accommodating stars anymore, with what one analyst called passengers.
Right. Everyone has to pull their weight.
Exactly. Under Enrique, the message is apparently crystal clear. Any PSG player has to get used to starting, coming off the bench, or even not being called up. Everyone has to be pushing 100% all the time. There's talk of a tangible new spirit where everyone plays for everyone and everyone presses for the ball.
And tactically on the pitch, it looks different too. Less about that slow keep ball possession.
Yeah, more about intensity. Described as being wound up into a kind of tackle fever. Their big strength now, their superpower, is the counter press and rapid team transitions, winning the ball back quickly and attacking fast.
The sources use a really interesting phrase for their style, cubism ball.
Yeah, I saw that. It suggests these rigorous geometric patterns, order, clean lines. It really highlights how disciplined and, frankly, brilliantly drilled this group seems to be under Enrique. It's very structured, very intense.
What's so fascinating, I think, is seeing the proof that this new approach isn't just talk, it's actually working on the pitch. And Ousmane Dembélé is maybe the prime example the sources point to.
Oh, absolutely. Dembélé, he had a pretty inconsistent time after Barcelona signed him, ironically as Neymar's replacement back in 2017. Big fee, lots of injuries, flashes of brilliance, but...
Yeah, never quite consistently delivered on that potential.
Right. So when PSG needed someone to step into a similar creative role in 2023, they signed him. And this season, under Luis Enrique, he's arguably having the best year of his career. The numbers are fantastic, 21 domestic goals, 8 in the Champions League, 10 assists overall.
And Enrique seems to have unlocked him. He said he gives Dembélé more freedom to go everywhere, basically encouraging him to create space and to cause a bit of chaos in midfield.
And it seems to be working wonders. That tactical freedom within Enrique's structured system is paying off massively for Dembélé and the team.
Now, we should probably keep some perspective here. While the payroll is described as reined in this season, down to $220 million.
Which is still a huge amount of money.
Absolutely enormous. More than the next 3 French teams put together, and it would be second highest in the Premier League. So the spending is still vast. The key difference those sources point out, though, is that now
they might actually get the big trophy for all that spending.
Exactly. And beyond just the talent and the tactics, this new team seems to have developed something the older, star-filled squads really lacked. This ability to suffer. That's a big buzzword in football.
Right, it really is. It means being able to dig in, endure tough moments, grind out results when things aren't going your way.
And the sources really hammer this point home. Past PSG teams, glittering as they weren't really built to suffer. They relied on those moments of individual magic. This year's team, while still packed with talent, crucially also has that willingness, that collective ability to suffer together.
It's about resilience.
And we've seen it, haven't we? In the Champions League knockout stages especially. They've won matches despite real adversity. That comeback against Liverpool in the round of 16, losing the first leg, then going away and grinding out the win on penalties.
That showed real steel.
And winning tough away games against Aston Villa in the quarters, Arsenal in the semis. This team doesn't seem to wilt when the pressure's on. They hold firm.
What stands out to you most when you look at this team's run?
For me, it's that blend. They still have incredible individual quality, no doubt, but it feels completely subordinated now to the collective.
Yeah.
To a high-effort, unified approach. It's that willingness to fight, to chase, to endure together that feels like the defining thing about this PSG team.
Yeah, I agree. It's a different mentality entirely.
Okay, so let's zoom in again. Stepping back from the pitch itself, how do the sources connect this whole footballing evolution to the much, much broader picture of the Qatari project?
Well, the sources frame it very clearly as nation-state power finding a way. This isn't just about owning a football club, however successful. It's a strategic projection of soft power. It's a massive commercial enterprise.
And the ultimate goal is still that huge ambition.
Exactly. The reiterated goal, stated quite openly, is to eventually overhaul Real Madrid as the most commercially successful football club in the world. Winning the Champions League would be a massive, monumental step towards that. A kind of coronation, as one source puts it, even in defeat, just in terms of validating the project's direction and success.
And you really see the scale of this ambition, not just in the player wages, but the infrastructure they're building. That 300 million campus PSG at Poissy. It's called the best training center in the world.
The details are kind of wild, aren't they? Everything from its own market garden to a hypoxic oxygen chamber, even a panic room, apparently.
A panic room. It just shows the level of long-term vision and, frankly, the seemingly limitless resources behind this whole thing.
And right at the center, orchestrating all of this, is Nasser Al-Khelaifi. The sources portray him as the absolute embodiment of the project's reach, its influence. I mean, look at his roles.
That's quite the list.
PSG president, sure, but also president of beIN Sports, a Qatari government minister, head of the European Club Association, and on the UEFA Executive Committee.
One source uses some pretty vivid imagery, saying he has both fists jammed in the pie.
And that he is the pie.
Yeah, it really underscores this deep, multifaceted control he wields across football and media.
And the sources detail how strategically he consolidated that power, especially using the chaos around the Super League proposal. Remember when those big clubs tried to break away?
Oh yeah, huge moment.
Khelaifi played it brilliantly. He sided firmly with UEFA, positioned himself as a key figure defending the existing structures, and ended up as head of the European Club Association, the ECA, which represents basically all the major clubs.
So the body representing the clubs is now led by the head of PSG.
Right. And the ECA is now described as a key driver of the new Champions League format. It's like his message was, yeah, don't do that breakaway Super League. Do this instead, with me helping run things.
Incredible positioning.
And it really illustrates how the project's whole power dynamic has shifted. The entity PSG, and by extension Qatar, it doesn't need to say please anymore. There's that anecdote about the Paris mayor, Anne Hidalgo, being absent from the final.
Because she refused to sell the Parc des Princes stadium to PSG.
Reportedly, yes. And the underlying message, according to the source, is almost like, you know what? We don't actually need to sit down and negotiate with you now. We are the entire buffet these days.
Wow, that speaks volumes about the leverage and the independent power this project has accumulated over the last decade or so.
Win or lose on Saturday against Inter, as one source concludes, that table is set. The structures are in place for this project's continued push for, well, dominance in European football and beyond.
So let's recap. We've traced this pretty incredible journey, haven't we? From that initial blunt state investment focused on brand building, through that high-profile superstar era, which, despite the Champions League frustrations on the pitch, was a massive commercial success in building global recognition.
Absolutely key phase.
Commercially.
To this current phase, a phase defined by a really deliberate strategic pivot towards a younger, team-focused, high-intensity approach under Luis Enrique, a team that can suffer.
And a Champions League title now would be just monumental for PSG.
Oh.
A historic first for them, and the first for any French club since Marseille way back in 1993.
Luis Enrique himself, he described this Champions League season for PSG as, what was it? A great thriller or horror film or even a very good series, because it has had a bit of everything.
He's got a way with words.
He has, and he's made it clear the team wants to finish the job and make history. It's definitely been quite a ride to follow this transformation.
Indeed it has. A fascinating case study.
So, considering everything we've kind of pulled apart from these sources, PSG's whole evolution, the sheer scale of the resources, the strategic brand building across these different phases, and the immense power now wielded by figures like Nasser Al-Khelaifi, what does this deep dive really suggest to you is the true end game here? Beyond just, winning trophies, what's the bigger picture painted by these sources?